Welcome to the Soccer Tavern, where we're discussing the history, philosophy, and culture of the beautiful game. My name is Dave, and in this video, we're discussing the history of Dee Rangers Football Club. Pull up a seat and let's start the discussion. Dee Rangers FC is located in the city of Chester. Chester is located in the northwestern part of England in the United Kingdom. It sits near the England and Wales border. The club plays in the Chester and District Sunday Football League Section B, which is the 11th tier of the English pyramid, though they often compete in the 10th tier cup competitions. The club's home ground is New Scene. They have played there for a few seasons. Prior to moving to this ground, the club played at various venues with no defined long-term home. These venues were Hull Park, county offices, and Barrow. Additionally, the club's spiritual home and original home pitch was the Rue D, which I believe is a part of the Chester Racecourse. The Chester Racecourse was established in 1539 and is the oldest operational racecourse in the entire world. Prior to becoming Dee Rangers in 1982, the club was registered with two other names. From 1973 to 1976, the club was registered as Stonegate. Then, from 1976 to 1982, the club was known as the New Inn. Both club names were related to sponsors of the club. In the summer of 1982, the four founder members of Dee Rangers met in a local alehouse to discuss how to break away from their current team, which was the New Inn. The reason for the break was that the New Inn was in debt to the league. So, Peter, Phil, Kerry, and Bev agreed to settle the debt and start fresh with a new squad of players and a new name. Back in the early 80s, demand was so high to get into the league that there was a chance any new team would be rejected if entry was put to a vote. So it was easier to take over an existing team, which is what happened here. The D part of the club's name came from the River Dee that runs through the city of Chester. There are some rumors about the Rangers part of the club's name being a reference to some old-fashioned river guards in the city. While this sounds really cool, the club said Rangers was simply chosen because it fit nicely instead of United City or any of the other traditional names often used with clubs in England. In 1982, when Dee Rangers became the adopted name, the club inherited a yellow kit from the New Inn. It was fairly ragtag and made of old-fashioned cotton, not ideal for the wet British weather. Right before the 82-83 season, Kerry Driver heard there was a sale at the Oaklands and popped in on the way to a match. Kerry found a 30-pound all-sky blue kit, slightly more modern than the New Inn kit that the club had. Kerry and Phil then cleared the store of all available stock, and that's how the club got their primary color of blue. The club has two nicknames, the Hoops and the Mighty D. The Hoops nickname is simply because Rangers' home kit often has blue and white hoops. Really simple and straightforward there. Now, the Mighty D nickname came about because the club is famous as often being a successful underdog. Many of the club's best days have come from cup games where the underdog Dee Rangers got a result against a heavy favorite. Nearly every generation of Dee Rangers players has at least one story of a great comeback or clever pragmatic win. One of the first notable underdog results was an away win against Vickers Cross, a very strong side leading Section A at the time. Dee Rangers was in Section C at the time, so 2 levels below Vickers Cross. The Mighty D turned up with just 10 fit players and ran out by winning by a single goal, much to the annoyance of Vickers Cross players. The club has had many great performances, both home and away, over nearly 4 decades. Some of the most notable wins came against Castle, Tarvin, Handbridge, and Custom House. That's where they get the nickname, the Mighty D. Let's take a look at Dee Rangers' crest right now. The club's first crest came when they moved to their blue and white hooped kit, which is very similar to QPR's notable kit. The original crest was a simple beer tankard. Over the years, a university cap, a football, a whistle, and even a flag was added as the crest changed shape. In 2017, manager Ryan and captain Jordan enlisted the help of a designer named Matt to bring the history of the club together in a more modern crest with less of a copy and paste feel that so many other clubs have. Matt designed the crest around the hoops that came from the club's kit. The club's colors of blue and white were included in the crest. The ball on the left side of the crest is self-explanatory. It's the sport that the club plays. The cap on the right side of the crest came from the university based in the city. And of course, the prominent 82 in the middle of the crest was the club's founding year. I'd like to highlight 3 important events in the club's history in this section. Before the 1988-89 season, the club officially registered their recognizable home kit as blue and white hoops. This was also the year the club won their first and so far only league title, taking home the Section C trophy. The Hoops had previously gained promotions as runners-up. In the 2014-2015 season, Dee Rangers was on the verge of folding and winding up or going bankrupt. Manager Ryan oversaw new sponsorship deals, debts paid off, and significantly updated the club's welfare structure. This season also saw the introduction of a second team dedicated to playing 35-plus football, the Dee Rangers Veterans. And the third event I'd like to highlight came in the 2018-2019 season. Dee Rangers was awarded Charter Standard status by the English FA. Charter Standard, which recently changed its name to Football England, is the accreditation given to a club that achieves a set minimum standard of operation. The club must have all of its coaches officially qualified and licensed. They must have an affiliated bank account with set structure in place for positions in committees. Basically, there are lots of small details and requirements that ultimately recognize Dee Rangers as an example of how clubs should be run and operated. It is a seal of approval from the National Football Association to say the Mighty Dee is structured and run with high quality. With the club almost ceasing to exist only 4 years earlier, this designation was especially sweet for Dee Rangers. During the 1980s and early 1990s, Dee Rangers sold a fanzine. Local sponsors advertised and stories were told about the Mighty Dee and their following of Chester City FC. The fanzine was so well received that they were able to sell it in and around the Greyhound Stadium where the city's most senior team played. That fanzine was called the Onion Bag and still is used to this day as the match program format for the annual charity match. Over the years, the Hoops have had a handful of players that have either come from bigger clubs or gone on to bigger clubs. Gaz Edwards is the current captain of Welsh Premier League side, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, Caernarfon Town, that's how it's spelled down there. Tom Walsh signed for the Mighty Dee after his release from the Liverpool side that brought Raheem Sterling through. Adam and Gary Wilson were 2 twins that played for Manchester City Youth. But the most famous player amongst the club is probably baby-faced Pete Mort. He has played for the club over 300 times and scored at least 1 goal in every single season until 2017 when he formally retired from the main squad. He now only plays for the Veterans, for which he has scored in every single season since they began play in the mid-2010s. Morty is a wheeler-dealer and all-around football man. He is still most famous for his decisive goal against the famous Hardmen of Saltney, during which his golden Nike boot came off his foot. He then picked it up, kissed it in front of the opposition bench as the Mighty Dee went on to win that match. I'd like to highlight 3 managers in this section. Peter Challoner or Challoner, I'm going to go with Challoner, apologies if that is not the correct pronunciation, Pete Mort, and Ryan Williams. Peter Challoner was the very first manager of Dee Rangers. He was a big, hard center back that loved a battle. Challoner was the man in charge of organizing the very first teams in the club's history, and he did so for over a decade. His biggest achievement was winning the 1989 league title that we discussed earlier. Pete Mort was the last of the old guard. We talked about him as a player, but Mort became manager after Andrew Bennion, and in Mort's first full season, he led Rangers to an immediate promotion after suffering relegation in the club's previous season. Pete was responsible for signing some very influential players in his brief 3-year stint as manager. And lastly, Ryan Williams only served 1 full season as a player before being drafted in as Morty's replacement as manager. Ryan has taken the team on its first ever cross-country away match, won the Reggie Bedford Memorial Shield, won Secretary of the Year from the league, achieved Charter Standard status for the club, which we talked about earlier, and he also created the annual Legends Day between the Vets and First Team for charity. Ryan's led Mighty Dee to 6 semifinals and 1 final. At time of recording, he is the club's current manager. The club's main rival is Custom House FC. The two clubs shared a home ground of the Rue D back in the 1980s, and both clubs drank in the same pub after their matches, thus a rivalry was born. Both Custom House FC and Dee Rangers serve as the two oldest member clubs in the league. Now, one other club worth mentioning here is Hickories FC. Hickories is no longer in existence, but when they were establishing themselves, one of the Hickories players was actively poaching and bribing a Dee Rangers player to join Hickories FC. Rumors of the bribes circulated, and after some players left Dee Rangers, the club nearly folded. While Hickories FC no longer exists, they were heated rivals, worthy of mentioning in this section. The stats and records we're about to discuss are as of February 2022, which is when we are recording this video. Dee Rangers is most often playing in Section B of the Chester and District Sunday Football League. It's a bit of a yo-yo club that often finds itself promoted to the top division, only to be relegated back to Section B the following year. Since winning Section C in 1989, the club has never been relegated back to that level. The club has won 3 trophies in its history. These include the 1988-1989 Section C league title, the 2016 Reggie Bedford Memorial Shield, and the 2018-2019 Chester Mini League following an early completion of the full formal league competition. The club's all-time appearance holder is Pete Mort. Morty has over 300 appearances for the club, though no official count has been kept, so we can't give you an exact number. The club's all-time leading scorer is Simon Brockers Broccoli with more than 125 goals. We don't have an exact number for the clean sheet record holder, but Bev Tilling has served in goal vastly longer than any other goalkeeper in the club's history, so he surely holds that record. And the club's record transfer was Sam Burgess. Sam was transferred for a £100 release fee and 8 Welsh Premier League standard match balls. And one last interesting fact about the club. Following the untimely passing of club legend Tom Arnold, Dee Rangers forged a relationship with the Clatterbridge Hospital that treated Tom for cancer. Over the past few years since Tom's passing, the club and its players have raised around £20,000 for cancer care at the Clatterbridge Hospital. The club has climbed mountains, starred in raunchy calendars, created and sold pin badges and custom memorabilia, and created an event called Legends Day. On Legends Day, the club's former players play the first team in a one-off match, followed by raffles, awards, cake sales, and barbecues, all for an absolutely wonderful cause. So there you have it, a bit of history on Dee Rangers Football Club. Let's continue the discussion in the comment section below the video. Thanks for stopping by the Soccer Tavern. Hope to see you again soon. Cheers.